All right, hello. Let's go ahead and get started on Unit 8. We're going to start with this little section that says evaluate and write exponential functions. And we're really just going to kind of be focused on evaluating them, okay? And then we'll get into graphing them in the next section. So whenever we evaluate an exponential function, which looks like this, okay, whatever number we're plugging into our parentheses here, notice is going to go into our exponent up here. So we're going to have to refresh on some of our exponent rules whenever we plug in negatives and things like that. Okay. Now, if you happen to have an exponential function that's in the form other than this basic form, so if there's things being multiplied, maybe there's things being added and subtracted or multiplied in the exponent, then we want to make sure that we follow the order of operations. Okay, so remember the order of operations is PEMDAS, right? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Or in other words, we do parentheses or grouping symbols first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. Okay, so make sure you're doing that because these problems are really not that hard. Where the mistakes are made is just in the simplifying and knowing which operation to do first. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a couple here. We have these examples, and our function for this one is f of x equals 30 times x squared. Now in Newton, your Newton Alta homework, you're going to see a lot of times where they put parentheses in here. This is something that if I was writing this, I probably wouldn't even put these parentheses in here. They're not necessary. But Newton will do that sometime just to make sure that you're clear on which part of this function has the exponent being applied to it, okay? So we can see here the only thing being squared is the x, okay? And they want us to evaluate f of 3 without using a calculator, okay? And I'm sorry if you printed these notes out before I caught my error here. This should not be suing. Okay, we want to evaluate f of 3 without using a calculator, not suing a calculator. So hopefully your version of the notes has been fixed and you don't have that typo. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and plug in f of 3. So we're going to put a 3 in everywhere we see an x in our original. So we have 30 times 3 squared. Okay, now order of operation tells us we do parentheses first. Notice there's nothing inside these parentheses to simplify. Then we move to exponents. Okay, so it's important that you apply this exponent first before you do that multiplication with the 30. Okay, so we're going to get 30 times 9, and then 30 times 9 is 270. So we just leave it like that. Okay, so just a refresher of plugging numbers into functions, and then a nice little refresher on order of operations. So let's look at another one. Same idea here. This is our function, and we're evaluating f of 0, okay? Again, without using a calculator, right? So we're going to go ahead and plug in f of 0, which means we're going to put a 0 in everywhere we see an x. We have negative 8 times 2. Notice the 2 is the thing with the exponent, so this is raised to the 3 times 0 plus 3. Okay, so when I plug that 0 in, I'm plugging it in where x is, which happens to be in the exponent. Okay, so order of operation, again, we do parentheses first. There's nothing inside these parentheses. There's also nothing inside these parentheses that I can simplify. So then we go to exponents. So I'm going to simplify this exponent first. 3 times 0 is just 0. Okay. And now I still have an exponent, right? Just because it's 0 doesn't mean it goes away. Remember our exponent rules from the beginning of the semester. Any number raised to the 0 power is 1, right? So this gives us negative 8. 2 to the 0 power becomes 1. And then order of operation tells us to do multiplication before addition. So we're going to do negative 8 plus 1, which is negative 8, and then add 3 to it. Negative 8 and 3 leaves me with negative 5. So we just leave it like that. Okay. Let's look at a couple more and then I'll let y'all try some. So again, without using a calculator, we want to evaluate f of negative 1. So if this is our function and we want to plug negative 1 into it, we're just going to put a negative 1 where our x is. Now notice our x is up here in the exponent, and it's being multiplied. So when you plug these numbers in, it's always a good idea to use parentheses. So we have 4, and then up in the exponent, we have 2 times negative 1 plus 3. All that's up in the exponent, right? All right, so we need to simplify that exponent first. So I'm going to do 2 times negative 1, which is going to give me negative 4 raised to the negative 2 plus 3. And then go ahead and combine negative 2 and 3, which gives me negative 4 to the first power. Okay. Notice there's no parentheses around this negative, right? So if this was something other than a 1, right, that we had to square or cube or whatever, it's only being applied to the 4. 4 to the first power is 4, and then we still have that negative out front. Okay? All right, let's look on the next page. I have a couple more to show you, and then I'll let you try it. So up here at the top, same idea. They give us a function, and we want to evaluate f of 2. So if I evaluate f of 2, that means I'm plugging a 2 into my function everywhere I see an x. So I have 2 minus 4, right? 2 minus 4 in the exponent gives me a negative 2, right? And then remember, negative exponents actually flip the expression, right? Where it sends it across the fraction line. So what I want to do is I can't actually evaluate this until I have a positive exponent. So I want to go ahead and rewrite this with a positive exponent by flipping it. So I'm going to move that 2 down to the denominator because right now it's in the numerator. And by flipping it down to the denominator, that changes the sign of my exponent. So now I have 1 over 2 squared, and then I can go ahead and simplify that. So I just get 1/4. Okay, everybody okay? So remember, anytime we have a negative exponent, that flips it. So always make sure you change it from a negative exponent to a positive exponent before you continue evaluating. Okay. All right, let's look at one more, another similar one. We have f of x is equal to 4 times 1/4 raised to the x plus 2 power. And we want to know which of these options is equal to f of 1. So again, we're just evaluating. This is just how your homework might look in Newton, where it's a multiple choice problem, okay? So let's go ahead and evaluate f of 1. So we're going to plug a 1 into our function everywhere we see an x. So we have 4 times 1/4 raised to the 1 plus 2. So I'm just plugging in that 1 up here in the exponent where my x was. Okay, so I do my exponent, right? So I have 4 times 1/4 cubed, right? And then remember, we do exponents before we do multiplication. So make sure you apply this cube to the 1/4 first. 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4 is 1 over 64. And now we can go ahead and multiply 4 and 1 over 64. Now you can multiply this and get 4 over 64 and then reduce it, okay? Or you can reduce it before you multiply. You can say 4 goes into 64 16 times, right? So we end up with 1 over 16, right? Or if you took this and reduced it by 4 on top and bottom, again, you would get 1 over 16, okay? So that would be my solution, is that second answer choice, okay? All right, so there are 3 for y'all to try. Practice 1 is on this page, and then 2 and 3 is on the next page. So you can go ahead and pause this video and work on those. Whenever you've finished and you're ready to check yourself, go ahead and unpause it and we'll see how you did. All right, so on this first one, all we had to do is plug in 2 everywhere we saw an x, which was up here in the exponent. 2 plus 1 gives me 3 in the exponent, and then I apply that exponent to that base 3 before I do the multiplication. So 3 cubed gives me 27, and then 27 times 5 gives me 135. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's look at 2 and 3. So number 2, we are plugging in 3 into our function where our x is. So notice our x is up here in the exponent. So we get 1/2 times 4 to the 3 minus 1. 3 minus 1 gives me a 2 in my exponent. We do exponent before multiplication. So 4 squared is 16. And then when I do half of 16, that gives me 8. Okay. All right, let's look at the last one, number 3. Number 3 wants us to know which of these is equal to f of 0. So we're taking 0, plugging it into our function where we see our x. So that gives us 3 raised to the 0 minus 3 power. So that gives us 3 to the negative 3 power, right? And we can't evaluate this until we get rid of that negative exponent. So we're going to go ahead and move it across the fraction line or flip it, right? Which gives me 1 over 3 cubed. And now that I have a positive exponent, I can go ahead and simplify that to 1 over 27. Okay, so the second option was my answer. All right, so that is the end of this section. So you should now be able to do this nice and easy little assignment to start off Unit 8, which is evaluate and write exponential functions. If you have any questions or you get stuck, let me know. I'm happy to help.